Okay.
Let me switch this off.
Yeah, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Once more, before we start off the record. What is it?
That's for me.
Oh, I've got one myself.
That's for me, sir.
Oh, for you. Clark has brought 2 copies of Pippa Scottner's book. As I said yesterday, it's a fantastic book to have. I checked the prices, what inflation had done to last year's price of mine. The one is the same price, $495. The next one is either an old copy or there's a mistake, it is $395. So if you want that, you must run now. But it's a really good book to have. Okay, let me start. The topic for today, the obsolescence and the revival of the language name Khoekhoegowab. Now what I want to do today, I want to argue that first of all the popular, most widely used glossonym is a language name. Nama was not the original name for this Khoe language of mainly Namibia. And secondly, that Nama was not an endonym, that means a name given by the people to themselves or for their own language, imposed on the Damara and other dialect groups by the dominating Nama people, but it was through the efforts of missionaries to develop a written language for the clientele that the endonym Khoekhoegowab was replaced with Nama as exonym. That means as a name that came from outside, namely from the missionary side. Okay, those are the arguments that I want to pursue today. I read a manuscript of a book by an unnamed author, and he was saying that some people claim that Nama was not the original name. This is wrong, he said. You can judge by the facts today whether I am wrong or not. Right, let's get on. What I want to do with this argument, first of all, I must add also, perhaps, yes, that my perspective is a Namibian perspective, where I know the social setup between the language speakers and so on. And the Nama are very dominant there, at least historically. The Damara were subservient to them. And this is why there is that feeling very often that the word Nama has been imposed on the Damara by the Nama themselves. And I want to show that this is not so. This is, again, a reference to the overall title of my course, Whose Language is Khoekhoegowab? And I want to show now with my documentation today that Khoekhoegowab as a glossonym is not just, or that it was reinstated in Namibia as glossonym, as language name, is not just a political whim, but it is well founded for historical reasons. So it is not arbitrary like introducing Bantu here in South Africa with political connotations and so on. This talk is based on a paper I wrote for a German compendium on sorry, that's a bit far. Oh, this moved on now. It's called Kolonialzeitliche Sprachforschung, die Beschreibung afrikanischer und ozeanischer Sprachen zur Zeit der deutschen Kolonialherrschaft. It's colonial language research, etc. The article was called Nama als Sprachbenennung in der Koloniallinguistik Westafrikas zwischen Endonym und Exonym. Just the whole issue, I don't have to translate it literally, not so important. Now, I want to remind you again about the current situation in Namibia, that you have 3 racial groups speaking this same language. And I told you also that we did this dialect survey and proved with that they basically do speak the same language. Here just to illustrate that if you haven't got an idea, this is a typical Nama. In this case, formerly Captain Hendrik Verboy later also Deputy Prime Minister of Namibia after independence. He is a Witboy of the Khoesan. That's the first group, the Khoekhoi speakers. Here you have a Negroid Damara, a rural Damara, playing a musical bow, a gomakas. You can see he's black as Bantu speakers are. But remember, I told you yesterday, it's in all aspects wrong to call a Damara a Bantu. Because first of all, Bantu does not mean Negro or black person. Secondly, he doesn't speak a Bantu language, he speaks Khoe language. Then those are the two big groups. And the Damara are 60% of the speakers, and the Damara just under 40%. So number-wise, the Damara dominate. Here you have a Hainkom. Hainkom literally means bush or tree sleeper. There are different reasons for that name. They are considered to be Bushmen. I'm wary with that because if you go to the east of Namibia, they are up there at the Etosha Pan. If you go to the east, they look more Said, sort of light-skinned, Bushman-like. The more you go to the west, the more they've interbred with Damara and they are dark Negroid types. So I don't think it's a straightforward category that you can assign here that they are Bushmen. And these Hainkom, to come back to that, they were hunter-gatherers, but it's said they slept in trees because there were so many mosquitoes in the north of Namibia, and they made fires on the ground and slept in the smoke in the trees. And also as safety against lions and so on, marauding. And then the last group, a minor group, the Khoekhoe, which they have first been up there in Ovambo, and during the Civil War, so they came down. We found these at the so-called Umbili Foundation, which is just south of the Etosha Pan. She's rouged her face, that's why she looks so red, and she's busy narrating stories, Karabini. So those are the four groups. Khoekhoe and Hainkom are fairly close together, and they link up linguistically very much with Naro from Botswana. Can you do something about the aircon?
That's a narrator, the back, no, behind you, behind the wall. That's it there.
So,
There's nothing you can do about it.
nothing we can do?
No.
Maybe you can get somebody else or something. Right. So those are the four phenotypes that we have. Just repeat also, you know all this already. The geographical distribution. Sorry. I just want to get this timer going. Here in the south, this is Nama. That's the Orange River to South Africa. Here they have an overlap in the central area, the Damara. Here are the Nami Dama. That means the Damara of the Namib. And the cess containers, they deviate also quite a bit, and that is the Hainkom area. The Khoekhoe were up here, but they have moved down to this area now. At least this is where I interviewed them. Right, now we come to the official language planning initiative, where the issue of Khoekhoegowab and so on was discussed later on. In 1963, the Commission of Inquiry into Southwest Africa, which is better known as the Odendaal Commission, and which is notorious for introducing South African Bantustan policies and so on, and therefore also the language policy was not favored by the people because it was associated with apartheid. But they stipulated that amongst the languages that should be developed, there were 5 Bantu languages, and then, quote, Nama and Khom. Khom was then already identified to be developed, but it was later abandoned. They were to have a language committee that is representatives of the speakers. That's also on the South African model. Now, this committee, the Taal Committee, it was all Afrikaans based there, for Nama, as it was called then, Then you can see you have Nama Damara, my colleague with whom I wrote school books for 10 years. Nama, Damara, chairperson. Daar is kaptein Hendrik Witboy, Nama. Was der Elifas Isaac, Damara, Nama. The two groups. Heinkom, even today, I'm not informed about the right now, what's happening right now, but in my days, we could never get Heinkom onto the committee, and Akwe anyway not. They were not literate Akwe. So these two groups were together. Now the Damara members objected very decisively that they did not serve in a Nama language committee because the language they spoke was not Nama. They said they speak Damara or Khoekhoegowab as they called it, that means black person's language. That contrasts with Abakoin, which were there's Roinasi, red Nama. And so they would not accept this situation, and it was sensitive, politically sensitive, because that idea of who got the language from whom, did the Damara get it from the Nama, was associated with the claim which arose in the middle of the 19th century that the Damara had been enslaved by their masters, the Nama. And of course, they would not like to hear that. So this whole idea had to be eradicated. And this is also why we did that language survey, the dialect survey, to see whether they are actually two different languages or not. I showed you, mentioned that briefly yesterday. Now, here is a book title from 1909, where explicitly they do present this claim that the Damara adopted the language. The Damara adopted the language from the Nama. This is the original German title I just translated here on the origin of the Nama language and the adoption of same by the Bergdam. Nobody contested that. Even the eminent Oswin Köhler, about whom I spoke yesterday very often, in 1981 wrote, I will not present my French pronunciation to you, but in a grammar, he said the Bergdama adopted the Nama language. So if a man like Oswin Köhler says that, who's going to contest it? Right. So the government accommodated the Damara in the committee by giving the double name Nama/Damara Language Committee. Now immediately, for instance, the broadcasting services came and they said not Nama Damara, but Damara Nama. Okay? Depends where your sympathies are. And they do it even now after independence. They've not followed the whole idea about Khoekhoegowab and so on. But they also hardly ever attend meetings of the committee, so that's another matter. But you see the problem in the titles. This is the second orthography, or the orthographic rules. It's just called the orthography number 2. It's called Nama Damara, the official name. And since that is only Afrikaans spelreels and English orthography, that's okay, the name goes. But you get a problem when you come to primers like this Standard 5 book, now grade 7, which was used for about 40 years, with a Khoekhoe title, that means we learn, and now it was bad to say Nama/Damara Boba. So we opted again just for Nama Boba. But it was an awkward situation. Right. Now let's get closer to the solution of this problem. I've got a map here again of the dialect but you've seen that before. Yesterday also the map, you know here, Nama in the south and Damara there. That's the same story. Here are the different groups that we investigated. I don't want to talk about that again. My colleague over 20 years, Pastor Elifas Eisen, a truly remarkable man, my closest colleague, I brought him into early retirement from his post as vice president of the Lutheran Church, so that he could work full-time on producing a dictionary. And he was very bothered by this dualistic nama, damara, damara, nama. And after some years of working, he said one day, I still see him sitting there in front of me. He says, I remember my grandmother, when I was a small boy. She had a name for this language. Khoekhoegowab. He repeated it. And that was the clue. I followed up in the literature. I started following up. And that's what I'm going to present to you now. And then you can judge whether it is right or wrong to claim that Khoekhoegowab was the original name. The name is still not, after it was officially accepted by the committee. Maybe I can just take time for a short anecdote. Pastor Eisen tabled the matter in this committee that you saw before independence, when Hendrik Witbooi was still a member of the committee. And there were different views given, especially the Damara were in favor of Khoekhoegowab and so on. And Hendrik Witbooi was just listening all the time. And then he said, all right, you've all had your say, now I'm going to give you my opinion. I speak Nama. I don't care what you speak, whether you speak Nama, Damara, Khoekhoegowab, whatever. I speak Nama. That was the end of the debate, and the matter was off the table until after independence. Then Hendrik Witbooi had higher posts with SWAPO in the government. He was not a member of the committee any longer. It was tabled again, and it was then accepted that the name would officially be Khoekhoegowab again. As I say, the people still are not familiar with the name. This is Pastor Elifas Eisen. And that is him just as we sat. I took a photo as he was explaining something about the language to me. And you can see how he enjoyed communicating his cultural matters to me and teaching me about it. Right. Now, people were so ignorant about the name that they pronounced it wrongly. Instead of, listen to my tone, instead of saying Khoekhoegowab, they would say Khoekhoegowab. This is the correct one. There are 4 tones in Khoekhoegowab. Khoe, just the second from bottom, that's the lowest one. But they pronounce it Khoe with the third from bottom. That means something totally different. The first one is the word Khoekhoe that we've heard so much so. The true, real people, all right? This one is what you call a causative. It's if you make somebody a person. In other words, they say this means that this language, only this language makes you a person. That's offensive. Therefore, they don't want to use it. But they've got the tone wrong. That's why they don't understand the meaning of the word. Right. That's one of the small issues there. I also want to say about this issue that I said yesterday already, that this was not elitist, this word Khoekhoe. Schulze Jena, the zoologist who created the term Khoesan, you know all about it, he has this text in his book. Here's a translation of that text. I just read the translation. If, thus, the designation Khoekhoe has been a collective name for all Hottentots, I put it in red, apparently it does not exist amongst the people any longer, written in 1907, right? Then it did not mean human elite, but merely was an expression that the Hottentot was aware of his genuineness among the people that surrounded him. He put it very well. This is why I repeat his quote here. So that as a preliminary to that, I will now go into the chronological exposition to show you how from Van Riebeck's days the name for the language developed and was used up to the present. With that, we must also understand that the missionary work in Namibia, which is, here's the Orange River there, in other words, north of the Cape here, that the mission work for all missions, London Mission Society, Wesleyans, Rhenish Mission, started in Cape Town. Missionaries landed in Cape Town by boat. They were prepared for their mission, for their work in Cape Town, and then traveled by ox wagon eventually over the Orange River. So this was really just an extension of the mission work they did in the Cape already. I've just marked the Orange River here. There were these stations that you had, for instance, there was Wuppertal in the Cedarburg, and there was Ebenezer at the mouth of the Olifants River, and so on. More stations. We had, of course, also the Moravians in Genadendal and so on, but that's a different matter. Now, the first missionaries that started work there went to what they called Nisbeth Bath, just about a day's travel north by Oxford, north of the Orange River. And they were Wesleyans. They started in 1800, no, sorry, they were German missionaries for the London Missionary Society. They started in 1906. In 1820, the Wesleyans followed, and in 1842, quite a bit later, the Rhenish Mission. So, I just want to skip a little bit here. Yes, now the point is, as they came from South Africa, and here, remember the Nama were also here in the Cape, the Korana were up here, the Grikwa had moved up, we talked about that yesterday. Therefore, as they came over the Orange River, they went into Great Namakwaland. This is Little Namakwaland, and that's Groot Namakwaland, where the Nama proper were, the Red Nation, the Abakoin, and later the Orlam. And they worked amongst the Nama, and they hardly met any Damara, because the Damara were more to the north, if you've seen on the previous map. And the point is, Nama were centered around their captains, their chiefs, in their clans. And you had the different clans, and they were sometimes politically strong, there was a lot of warfare and so on. The Damara lived at most in extended families, amongst especially the Herero. They were also subservient to the Herero, if not to the Nama. And therefore they were scattered, all from, let's say, Windhoek up. And so you had almost 50 years of mission work in southern Namibia, just amongst the Nama. That was the reason why it became the Nama language. Right, now we want to go to the actual chronological forms. We start with Van Riebeeck. 1653 in January, that is about 9 months after he had arrived. He writes in his Dagregister, please pardon my Dutch, anybody's Dutch speaking here?
Me.
Who, you? So pardon me please, or you must read for us. Okay, the Saldanas, onder de heer Khoena genaamd. The Saldanas, there you know where Saldanha Bay is. They lived in that area, therefore the Dutch called them Saldanas. There you have the word Khoena. Don't worry about the spelling, because Van Riebeeck and all his fellows didn't know how to spell this language. Okay? There you have it, 9 months after they arrived. Just Khoena, just the word people. In 1657, this is all from the Dagregister. Khoena als eenspraak in de kledingwezende. Again the word Khoena, here just with the grammatical suffix R. 1657 again. Koringai Khoena, Kijkman's grootste troep. Koringai and all the spelling, Harry's troop and the Olde Watermans. Now this is one of the few names, there are only 2 or 3 of the clans that at least I can reconstruct what it really means. Because they give a translation, they say these are the people of the Hoge Kraal. Kuri means elevated and insubservient, and Khais is a nation, tribe. So the actual name of these Khoekhoe is Khoekhoe. But there you have the word Khoe. So they are just calling themselves people, all right? Let's look at the next one. We go chronologically through this. We come to Nicolaas Witsen. Nicolaas Witsen was a Dutch statesman. He was about a dozen times or more. He was the mayor of Amsterdam. He traveled in the East. He was a minister, and yes, he was also then in the Cape. And he writes, Quena de Hottentottsche Nation, Natio Hottentottica in genere. In general, in other words, it's a generic name to call them just people. I'll explain to you just now why just people. But this is how if you go through Nineveh, who is the big source on that, I told you yesterday, they pulped his book of 1,000 pages. Then you find these quotes. Now here, Francois Valentine, 1726. He was also a naturalist and a minister, and he writes here, de oudste en eigenlijke ingezeten van de Kaap zijn de Hottentots. Waar die naam vandaan komt, weet ik niet, altoos niet van hem, al zou zij zichzelf een Khoekhoe noemen. There it's not Khoe, but Khoekhoe. And it is 1726. In other words, the 18th century. In the 17th century, they still just said Khoe, as Van Riebeeck and others quoted. Now they start with Khoekhoe. The translation, roughly, do I have it here? No, okay, that's the next one. But it roughly means the oldest and the true inhabitants of the Cape are the Hottentots. Where the name comes from, I do not know. All along, not from them themselves, as they call themselves Khoekhoe. Okay, this is the important change, round about the turn of the century. Now you come to Colonel Gordon, who was a very educated man, a Scotsman. He was a Dutch explorer, or for the Dutch, a naturalist and a linguist, and later he commanded the Cape Garrison until 1795.
Prof?
Yes.
The period that they're giving you is how you saying that the Khoi were the first people to live at the Cape, inhabit the Cape.
We're not talking about the
How
South.
far back are you going? Are you saying 2000?
Oh, before them. You mean before the Dutch arrived?
They've arrived, the stories that they've arrived at the Cape about 2,000 years ago. I just want to, because it's something that's...
I'm out of my academic depth there. We've all heard about Cradle of Mankind and all that. So I can't tell you anything more intelligent as you might know yourself. I cannot say how long they have been here, and it's still a debate. Did they come from East Africa or not? Remember, not North Africa, the Hermetic theory is out. But the question is still, how far did they extend up in East Africa? So I can really not answer that question, how long they've been here before Van Riebeeck. Just this morning when I was preparing this, I found an article again which was published only 2-3 years ago on the first words of Afrikaans, and they were recorded before Van Riebeeck arrived. Okay, what later was perpetuated in Afrikaans, because there were already boats coming into the harbour here and meeting them, and also elsewhere on the coast and so on. But your question about 1,000, 2,000 years, I cannot answer that. There are terms that the Bantu started coming down 2,000 years ago. This is where you go to archaeology and so on, but I'd rather not venture into that now. Okay. Good. As I say, questions for understanding now, please. Discussion later, otherwise I won't finish, like yesterday. Right, this is what Gordon said in a letter in 1779, so towards the end of the 18th century. Voor eerst hielden zich de Hotten tot een Khoekhoena, again the double form. In dialect zeggen sommigen voor Khoekhoena and Aina. The Aina were also on the Kavango, on the Orange River later on, where the Korana were. They extinct. Dat betekent letterlijk mensen. The N is the plural. Zijn de Khoena meervoud van Khoe, mens. That's the stem of the word. Okay, there you have it. I don't need much to elaborate much on that. Now, Nina, in his article on these issues, says about the Dach register here, that here the Saldanas, Khoena genaamd, that one must not understand Van Riebeck as saying that Khoena was the name of the Khoe at Saldanha specifically. It's the name for all of them. And there is a commentary somewhere written in Geneve. You've also seen it. In other words, that a generic term for all these people here who speak those languages, excluding the San. Because that is the issue. And this is another issue why the word San is pejorative. The Khoe were the people. The San were not people. They were gatherers. Okay? By implication. Rude. Good, let's get back to where we were. Now, you see, they started using the word Khoekhoe. Why? In the 17th century. Because by now there were other people around, namely those Dutch, and also before that, as I said, they were alone. They just had those gatherers with them who were not people. They knew about the Pirin, that is the goats, i.e. the Tswana, the Bakshapi, up there in Botswana. That's where they got their first goats from also. And the Xhosa hadn't arrived at the beginning yet. They only came down later. But now there were these Dutch people, and they had to specify what kind of coin. Not just true coin, Khoekhoe, but for instance, here were the words recorded in 1673, the Onqui, Belga, or Honqueka. Now Nina speculates, there again Gordon. They hätten uns Khoekhoe, I don't know how to pronounce it, or Honquea, die eerste syllabe met een sissende slag, der tong tegen de tanden uitgesproken. In other words, these names with a click in front. Nina speculates that that word onki could be either onkoiga, or it could also be onkoiga. On is hair. These Europeans that arrived had strange hair in their view, like millicops. That's what they compared it to. Or the other one is a word still used today, onkoi. Onkoi means boss. Right? In other words, they were the bosses, the boss people. So, there you can see structurally, you have the word koi, but not konkoi, khoekhoe, but konkoi. You qualify the noun koi. That is why they had to double it, because it did not go without further saying any longer that all people were Hottentots. And that was in the 18th century. Now, we come to Namibia. The first book that was printed in Namibia was, the books were done by Schmelin, the missionary Schmelin, who worked in Bethany. The title looks like this. It probably is Tui Namadinga Kanis Namankandis, question mark I put in. The reason is Schmelin had translated, this was a catechism and also another reader. He calls it a Nama questioning book for the Nama nation. And he had done it with his Khoe wife that he married, and he traveled to Cape Town to have it printed, but the clicks that he had invented did not fit into the printing machine. So the printer just left them out. There are no clicks in here, so you cannot understand the book. It was useless, right? And this is probably there you see the titles in. But why I'm mentioning it is, he starts in 1930 and already he writes a Nama questioning book for the Nama nation. He still speaks of the Nama nation, in other words, an ethnic term, so to say. But in the Nama language. Interesting thing also, Tui is that come from probably Dutch ein in the sense of an indefinite article, a. He meant a, but they gave him the number 1, which is a translation mistake, right? Good. There you have the Nama coming in. Here's the next book by him. Neeske tui komai kanis, tui komsa hu horto yahas, nama kovap na, on these. That's what it probably is. Same problem, no clicks, but he speaks again of nama kovap, not khoekhoegowab, right? Interesting here, there's the word for a book. Kanis is a piece of paper, something that you speak on when you read. It's a reader book. Okay? Kom is speak, a is on. But again, he speaks 1830, first publications of a Nama language. Now here comes Schmeden again in a letter. And that letter was written in 1825, 24, something like that, 5 years before these books came out. I just read the translations. There's the original German. From the people with whom I stayed, I've heard that there were Khoekhoe. Those are peoples that have clothes and that they have much cattle and many oxen. In other words, Schmeden was aware of the word Khoekhoe in the wider sense. But in his publication, he already used Nama. The interesting remark, people that have clothes, it was about 150 years until they started walking around in European clothes. We will talk about loan words, what you can derive later on. We come to the word Poliquin and so on, yes.
So which year was that?
This one. This was 1825.
When they started to wear European clothes?
Yeah, that's some, he remarked it because it was still not the usual thing. Schmeden himself, he explored a lot up to Windhoek. He rode on an ox because he could not ride with a horse in those conditions. He had a skin, a sheepskin, I think it was sheepskin, that he used in the day as a saddle and in the night to sleep in. And he also dressed later on, after he'd been some years and his European clothes were worn. He dressed in skins.
Oh.
And if you read the diaries of the three missionaries at Nahuatl, 1792 they started. I give you the quote, I think tomorrow. They say it is quite, what was the word he used, but remarkable to see how people come. Those who have European clothes walk in front. Those in sheepskins walk at the back. Women never have European clothes. So that was at the end of the 18th century, 150 years after Van Riebeeck arrived.
Thank you, sir.
Right, here we come to the first practical book that could be used for reading. It was by a missionary, Khoesan. The title, here I've translated it, Nama ABC Kanis, a reciting and reading book. He's got clicks also for it, but he speaks of Nama again, not Khoekhoe. Even from the start, when they started in Namibia. Here you come to Knudsen in a manuscript in 1844, a year before this book came out. I read just the translation again. Khoekhoe or Hottentots. They call themselves Khoekhoe. He knows it. They call themselves Khoekhoe. This is the actual common name or ethnonym, which all the clans, Orlam, Namakwa, Korana, Grikwa, Bushman, Navisen, and so on, are considered to belong, excluding the Bergdama or Herero, who are black. All right? But there you have it. He knows they call themselves Khoekhoe, but he uses Nama. Henry Tyndale was of the Wesleyan mission. He published a grammar in 1856, a grammar and vocabulary of the Nahuatl Language. So he made this, the he differentiated of all the Hottentots whom he didn't call Khoekhoe. He said they are specifically the Nama in Namibia for whom he wrote that book. Okay. In 1856, that was, his book came out in, it came out in that year, but in 1856 the missionaries of the Rhenish mission decided to standardize their orthography. And they had a conference in Wachanas, that's a small place, where they decided how to spell these clicks. And they sent their proposals to the linguist Lexius, Richard Lexius, in Germany, with whom Blake had also studied and who was an authority on the comparative method with Indo-Germanic and all that. And they still had the issue about the sign for this click, but anyway, they accepted that double dagger later on. That is and the 4 basic clicks. Each one has got 5 variants, so that's why you have 20 clicks for Khoekhoe. Now, Tyndall had tried to use Roman letters like in Xhosa, an X for this one, a C for that one, and a Q for that one. They don't have this one in Xhosa. But he was kind of overruled. He could not influence the general trends. His orthography was not accepted. This is the standard orthography ever since that 1856 conference. Now there was an inspector of the Rhenish mission, Johann Christian Bollmann. He wrote this book here, that is a morphology of the Nahuatl language, contribution to South African linguistics. But there you see, he says also Nahuatl language in 1857. But in 1858, the same man writes, and here's the translation of that bit of text, the tribes named thus far are referred to with the name Hottentots or Khoekhoe, as they call themselves. He also knows it, but his book equals Nahuatl. Sorry. Did I press the wrong button? Okay. Right. Theophilus Hahn, Dr. Theophilus Hahn, an educated son of a missionary in Namibia, wrote this book, Tsunitkom, the supreme being of the Khoekhoe. Tsunitkom is the traditional superior god of the Khoekhoe. He calls it Khoekhoe, right? Because he also spoke the language. Now we come to Olp. Olp was also a missionary. He was assistant of Kroon Lion, the doyen of the Nama work in the 19th century. He was, for 26 years, he worked in Beersheba, near Keetmanshoop. And Olp wrote sorry, maybe I can quickly go back to Hahn. That one. No, sorry, I don't have the translation here. Yes, we can take this one. That was his PhD. The language of the Nama there at the bottom, with an appendix containing specimen text from the lips of the people. Edited version of a dissertation with an appendix on myths of the Khoekhoe, with translation and a glossary. In other words, there he uses the kind of hyponym, the overall umbrella term for the Hottentots. But specifically the dialect or language or lect, whatever you want to call it, of the Nama that he's using. So he knows about the difference. All right?
Sorry, question.
Yes.
In all these deliberations by the linguists and philologists, were the Khoi people involved in it? Was it all about?
These grammatical books and so on, in those days, yes, there were missionaries who did it, not even linguists. The linguists come in the next century. In other words, they did as best as they could. And therefore you have the problems that they very often try to impose their Old Testament language grammars, Greek grammar and so on, categories on the grammar. and things had to be strongly revised now that we have linguists. We'll come to texts by Khoe just now, but they were not in book form. In book form, you have something like later on the dictionary by Pastor Isaac and myself. He couldn't have done it alone, I couldn't have done it alone. Right? That was the collaboration, which was fruitful. While beyond that, Pastor Isaac was a very modest man. And one day, this was his opus magnus in his life. And one day he said to me, I always wanted to make a dictionary of my language, but I didn't know how to do it. And then I met you. That is the cooperation, which we hope for now also in future. Anyway, let's get back to this. This is old. Yes, there's the translation of their previous text. I just heard the English one. He said, on a level higher are the actual Nama or Namakwas, who in distinction to all those previously mentioned, and those were Bushmen, I inserted that, are pastoralists. On no account may the Khoekhoe, also called Orlam, be considered to be part of them, of the Bushmen and so on. Since 1867, the Khoekhoe dominate politically. Now he has a different form. He equates Khoekhoe with Orlam, which is just part of the Khoekhoe, right? But that is his attitude here. 1867 was the Orlam peace, where there were 3 Orlam tribes that had attacked the Roinasi and so on. And after that came also Africana, Jonker Africana and so on, who was a marauder, came with guns and horses from South Africa with war techniques that he'd learned from the colonisers and so on, and he dominated Namibia, at least up to Windhoek and Korana. Right. Now this is Khoesan, the eminent Khoesan, the doyen of Nama in the 19th century, who worked in Dar es Salaam for 26 years. This is his, after he translated the Old Testament, he translated the Psalms, so they were repeatedly reprinted up to today. And this is his most important